Welcome back to Kintsugi Heroes, helping people tell the stories they need to share so you can find the stories that you need to hear. In this episode, John Millam is joined by Ben Bravery, who has had a remarkable journey from a career in zoology to becoming a doctor. Influenced by his mother's ambition and a deep curiosity about the world, Ben initially worked in environmental policy before moving to China as a youth ambassador. His life took an unexpected turn when he was diagnosed with stage 3 bowel cancer. This life-altering moment inspired him to transition into medicine, not just as a profession, but as a platform for change. Join us as Ben shares how his personal experiences shape his commitment to transforming healthcare from within, emphasizing empathy, patient care, and meaningful change. Enjoy this one with Ben Bravery.
Hello, listeners out there to Kintsugi Heroes, and welcome to another podcast, Stories That Matter. And enormously privileged today to talk to a man who is a doctor, scientist, was zoologist, I think the term was, patient and author, among many other things, right? Ben Bravery. Thank you, Ben, for joining Kintsugi Heroes, Stories That Matter.
Thank you, John. What a privilege for me to be here talking to you.
Oh, you're very kind. I love the idea. When I heard you speak, and you were inspiring and challenging and real, right? Both lived experience and and also valid technical input, right? So, but an incredible story, right? Which is where it all starts, right? So maybe we go back to the young Ben Bravery. I often say, let's go back. How did the young Ben Bravery end up with? Before we get into the patient side of things, how did you end up deciding pandas was the thing, right? So.
Yeah, well, I didn't, like a lot of things in life, I didn't actually decide on pandas.
Right.
Pandas decided on me. And I think part of that is like having an opportunism, right? So looking for opportunities and taking them when they present themselves. And I think if I think back, that comes from my mum. She was is an incredible person, and she raised myself and my sister, who's 2 years younger, in Southeast Queensland.
Yeah.
And she did that alone. Neither of our fathers were around, and when they weren't particularly helpful.
Yeah.
And so she did it on her own, and she was, this was pre-Centrelink, so she had to make it work, and she relied on family, of course, but she's also got this incredible inner strength
Mm.
and ethic about her. She would work up to 3 jobs at a time. She wanted us to have something different, and she wanted us to be different. And I think she just always looked for opportunities for us to grow as a family. She really respected us as her children, and that sounds funny to say, but she would talk about adult things with us.
Yeah.
And I think it's because she was doing it alone. We were the 3 of us became this quite tight unit. And that gave me a sense of ambition, of drive, of wanting to improve myself, but also the things I walk past and the situations I see. She had a real drive for inclusivity before it was a word. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
racism wasn't allowed, intolerance wasn't allowed, respecting differences was encouraged. And so that's kind of, when I think back, that's the foundation of who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So many challenges for, in particular, men, which is a particular focus of mine, right? Is often traced back to the struggle for men to, for young people to have positive male role models and so on. So, did did you think, like, your mum sounded like she created an amazing environment of support and but also challenge, right? Was that, was she doing a job as a positive male role model? Is that where?
No, no, I think, and enough. It's a that's a difficult thing for me to talk about with her
Yeah,
because she is my mum,
yeah,
and there was no she didn't try to be
mm,
the other gender or the other role. And and she did the best she could, right?
yeah.
It's not all Care Bears, John.
No, no,
There were some difficult times, and
yeah,
some of that's to do with the men that she chose to
right,
bring into our lives,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I'm very open with her about this, and she's a different person today. But I didn't have positive male role models, and in fact, I actually feared maleness
mm,
and ego and testosterone and
yeah,
aggression
yeah, right,
for obvious reasons. My grandfather, who had four daughters, one of whom was my mum, um, played that role to some extent, but could never be that role
mm,
because
no,
one generation removed, and he's my mum's
yeah,
dad, which meant that I had very positive female role models around me, and that's carried through to today. But it meant that I was aware that I didn't have
mm,
that male role model, which led me to actually find one,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that's how I chose my dad. Yeah.
Brilliant. I love that. Yeah, finding those role models. So it sounds like you were set up to adventure, right? And of course, that's what you did, right? Zoology. So you studied zoology. Why?
It's a bit of a wild choice. It's a bit of a outlier in the sense that my family were very like working class, grounded people,
Mm,
right? So you went to high school for as long as you needed to get a job.
mm,
You didn't finish.
no.
You did as much as you needed to go get a job because that was where the effort
Mm,
should be. That's where the career was. And my family, to their credit, like they get jobs and they hold them. It's the
yeah,
generation where they've worked somewhere for 25 years
yeah,
and they've worked their way up the chain. It's very impressive. They're natural leaders and managers
mm,
and organizers. So for me to say at one time around the dinner table, like I'm going to go to university, first of all, and they were suspicious
yeah,
because people that went to university, they thought were
yeah,
snobby. They thought they were better than them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's this whole
Couldn't
fear of it.
work in an iron lung.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And then also, hang on, you're going to study animals. Why on earth would you want to study? Oh, you mean you're going to be a vet? I'm like,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
I'm sorry, Nan, I'm not going to be a vet. She's like, I guess you're going to work in a zoo. It's like, no, I'm not going to actually work in a zoo either. So you're just going to sit around and read about animals and then maybe go and find one in the wild. It's like, that's exactly what I want to do.
wow.
And so it kind of came from a deep empathy with animals and the environment, right? Like I can remember from a very young age watching a documentary about the tuna industry. I was born in 82, so this would have been like 88, 87.
Right.
And that's when we were becoming really aware of like
Yeah,
bycatch and the
yeah,
environmental consequences of these things. And I was watching this tuna documentary and these fishermen were just slicing up dolphins because they were also eating the tuna. And I just burst into tears and my mum ran into the room and she held me and she turned the documentary off, which I actually wanted to keep watching. But I remember like I was just struck
yeah,
with this need to connect with animals, particularly in the injustice,
yeah,
and help them out. And I
yeah.
could see that people were a problem when it came to wildlife and animals, right? And so I wanted to understand that scientifically to see what I could do about it.
Incredible answering that call. So, studied zoology. And then, from the talk, I know that you ended up in China, right? And, the pandas are, as I said, they seized on you, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, and of course, at that stage, heading to China was also an adventure. So,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
yeah.
So like for example, within the family, if I think about the extended family, like I left the area, Southeast Queensland, Logan, where I grew up, and that was unusual. To go to university was unusual. To live overseas was unusual. There was a series of firsts.
Mm,
There was I had like an outward view.
mm,
I didn't want to just close off and stay local. And I think that comes from that ambition I talked about. It comes from
mm,
mum, seeding this idea that there was more and
mm,
that there was stuff to be discovered and it was all wonderful. And so, yeah, I took my, after a year of working for the Australian government, trying to do environmental policy, but
mm.
realizing I was just rubber stamping coal mines,
Yeah.
I decided to go and to China as a youth ambassador for development, right? So like
Wow.
aid program,
Wow.
and work in this nature reserve off the southern coast on an island called Hainan, saving endangered deer, and then helping them promote that incredible work. And it was like this was three languages removed from
Yeah.
standard Chinese, right, from Mandarin, so very local, quite remote, a long way from Beijing, where all the policy
Yeah.
comes from. Kind of like the Wild West.
Yeah.
A lot of China saw it, and it was wild. It was so fun.
Yeah. Wow. Because naturally, China is an extraordinary place to visit. So
Incredible.
for a
Di-
zoologist, it would be insane.
it's really interesting from two aspects. So you've got this amazing human diversity, culture, food, language, rich history, really strong principles that the cultures have maintained over thousands of years, and then you have this really intense modern conflict with the environment. So the Chinese are unparalleled in their ability to landscape and
Mm.
modify the environment. They build enormous dams, still the largest dam on Earth. It
Yeah.
changed weather patterns
Yeah.
locally where it was
Has its
built.
own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the Great Wall, if you think about
Yeah.
it, is a large environmental modification thing that still is ambitious in scope. They plant millions of trees when they need to, they
Yeah.
clear millions of trees when they need to, they shift rivers, they put up skyscrapers, they
Yeah.
take them down. And all of this is in conflict with wildlife. Wildlife compete with them for space,
Mm.
which is a premium in a country that's the most populated on Earth. And they overlap in the foods they like to eat. Whether people find them delicacies, whether people find them having medicinal properties, it was tense, right? And there's this kind of sense of Chinese growth and expansion, and often that would come at the cost of the
Mm.
environment, right? The air that I
Mm.
lived in was not clean.
Yeah. Yeah.
The water that I drank, I could not trust.
Yeah.
The restaurants I ate were regularly plagued by scandals that involved
Yeah.
plastic in the food, rat meat pretending to be lamb. Like it's kind of intense on all levels.
Right.
But at the same time, as a 20 something, I could not think of a better place
Yeah.
to spend some of those formative years.
So, um, the journey itself, right, which is like, and I'd invite people to check the story, like the complexities of China and your journey through the zoology of it all. Um, from a person, like that, an extraordinary adventure. From a personal point of view, your story really takes on some challenge when you come back to Australia for a visit, and then you're not feeling well.
Absolutely. I'd been living in China for 4 years. I
Mm.
had no intention to leave. I'd pivoted from science to science communication. So I was helping Chinese researchers promote their work abroad.
Right.
And there was this really ambitious agenda to do that. It was post Olympics. There was lots of money for this kind of thing. And people saw, the Chinese people themselves, to their credit, believe in the prestige of science. They
Yeah.
believe in the academic history of them as a people.
Yeah.
And that shone through. And so I was capitalizing on that and helping Chinese researchers, mainly zoologists, communicate amazing stuff that they were doing, but needed the world to learn about. I was building a business, had just fallen in love. I was in a relationship of just 5 months with a Canadian journalist. Everything was going beautifully, except it wasn't.
Right.
So for about 6 months, I'd had a whole range of symptoms that I'd kind of ignored.
Yeah.
And we may get into why guys in particular do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'd ignored them, and I'd just come back to Australia to get a visa. It was a 5-day trip, and I happened to tell my mum before the trip about all my symptoms. It was
Mm.
time to kind of share. And what better place than your mum?
Mm.
And she quickly told me I was having a colonoscopy, and she did that not because she's a doctor, but just because she loves them. And so she had scheduled me a colonoscopy in those 5 days, and I never made it back to China. What
No.
was found during that colonoscopy stopped me in my tracks and set me on a completely different path.
Yeah, which was a diagnosis of bowel cancer. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Quite an advanced one. So, like there's a staging system in cancer. This was
Yeah.
around stage 3, so before the big scary one of stage 4, but it was on the cusp, and all the behavior of the tumor and the cancer indicated it was on its way. I quickly learnt that young people that get bowel cancer
Okay.
tend to get it later, because for the same reason that I've just told you, John. Like
Yeah.
I just ignored some things,
Yeah.
and some things were common, like
Yeah.
diarrhea and constipation, and I'd lose a little bit of weight, and then I'd
Well,
put the
you're in
weight back
China.
on.
You something you ate, right? Is
Right?
yeah. Yeah.
Like consistently, and I was eating at all the places I knew I shouldn't because they
Yeah.
tasted amazing. And so I'd regularly have gastro and just go, oh,
Yeah.
well, it's
Yeah.
gastro, and then a bit of bleeding crept in, and it was time to face the facts that something was really wrong.
Yeah. So, stage 3 bowel cancer is scary. Uh,
Yeah,
seriously scary.
Yeah,
So,
it's like
and
50-50. It's
yeah,
50-50 at that
yeah,
stage. Yeah.
for a young man with everything going right, right, what uh, what did you do to accept that diagnosis?
Uh, it took a while, mate. It took a while. I mean, I didn't I never kind of rejected it, so I didn't
Mm.
do that denial
Yeah,
kind of thing that is common. I accepted it. I went back to basics,
yeah,
so I had a little poke around the scientific literature.
yeah,
It was different though, like it was medicine, so it
yeah,
wasn't zoology. I didn't know
yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of the stuff. I consulted experts, cancer council,
Mm,
surgeons,
mm,
oncologists, because that's kind of, what I was used to
yeah,
doing when you wanted to learn something. Um, I leaned on family
mm,
and friends around me, which is another way that I'd coped with things in the past, and drew from them and their opinions and their advice about what I should do. But to be honest, I think it took a bloody long
yeah,
time
yeah,
to really embody the diagnosis,
mm,
because cancer's this weird thing, right, where it's you but it isn't.
mm,
So it's like it's tissue that started off as you,
yeah,
but it's not me anymore. It's become this thing that's mutated, and it's got a life of its own, and it's got its own agenda,
yeah,
and it feels foreign. It
yeah,
feels like an infection. It feels like something that's come in, and it's going to do bad things, and the treatment is to get it out,
yeah,
so that
yeah,
that gap between me and it kind of persists. It took a long time to accept that this was a real thing that had real consequences, and to own up
yeah,
and face those consequences. The 50-50 odds, the
mm,
chance that I might emerge, but I'd emerge very different,
yeah,
with different anatomy,
mm,
um, different biology,
mm,
different psychology, different function, right?
mm,
And that it would not only change me, but it would change the people around me.
yeah,
It it took a while to do that, and to be really honest with you, John, like 14 years later, I'm still kind of doing it,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
yeah,
I'm still kind of working out
yeah.
what it all meant.
This moment, like there's, having some experience myself.
Mm,
The people can, like men tend to immediately gear up for battle.
mm.
Was that your response?
No, I didn't identify. There's a whole war on cancer
Yeah,
narrative, right?
yeah,
I just didn't identify it, John. And now that you know a little bit about my history,
yeah,
you'd see why I didn't want to
yeah,
use that language.
yeah,
It's not natural for me. I've never been in a fight.
yeah,
I'm an absolute pacifist,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I'm lucky, and I'm
yeah,
6'5", so people tend to
yeah, yeah.
avoid me.
Yeah,
Um,
you're naturally suited for pacifism.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and I'm fast on my feet.
yeah, good, good, good.
So, so and the idea of fighting it and going to battle, and people tried to say that to me, and
Yeah,
I would like
yeah,
nod. I would nod and accept their view. It just didn't feel right to me. It also felt like that it wasn't a war, because it's still my body,
yeah,
and I've got to be in it afterwards.
yeah, yeah,
And yes, I will have scars, and yes,
yeah,
there will be changes, but I just was really uncomfortable with the aggression
yeah,
of it. Not that I didn't want all the treatments, and I knew they would be toxic, right? Which is
yeah.
a different type of aggression, but I just didn't want to be aggressive about it.
Yeah, I love that view, like the concept. Because for me, it was it's kind of it was a new concept, right? Like battle was,
Mm,
probably my first option for everything in life,
yeah,
really. So,
yeah.
um, but as now, perspective, when you look back at that, did that give you something extra? Was that like that sense of were you closer to understanding the integrated nature of your body, right? Like because healing is something that isn't
Mm,
a battle, right? You don't
mm.
fight your way to healing. You sort of integrate into healing. Does that was that a benefit to you?
Yeah, I mean, you're doing a better job than me of explaining that. Actually, that's a really nice concept. I didn't. I guess I didn't have, I don't see it as an advantage because I think there's lots of ways to
Yeah.
approach illness and
Yeah.
recovery. And particularly in my branch of psychiatry that I'm a doctor in now, I'm well aware of multiple ways of being and living. I don't think it gave me advantage. I just think it suited me, and
Mm,
I think that's what you have to do. You have to find the thing that's a natural extension of you that draws on your skills but creates space to adapt, right?
mm,
Which is what you mean by, I think, by integration. Integrating new ways of thinking, new skills, but also recovering as a whole.
mm.
And I was aware, but scared of what would be left at the end. I wasn't sure how much of me, and anatomically and kind of psychically
Yeah.
almost,
Yeah.
was going
Yeah.
to be intact,
Yeah.
and,
Right.
and whether people would like that
Yeah.
person, whether it would be too burdensome
Yeah.
for people, um, and you're right. It's an integration, and I think that's part of choosing to become a doctor, which is where
Yeah.
this ends. Is
Yeah.
like maybe that's the ultimate integration. Like maybe I've just gone back into this world
Mm,
as someone without cancer, but still experiencing, what it means to live with the diagnosis and constant surveillance, and still learning
mm,
about who I am in this
mm.
post-cancer world.
So interesting because I often think, and talking to people, I often think the place for men to begin to grow and expand, it begins with identity and to have that there's safety, but often it's that complete breakdown of that crisis that we encounter that begins the distracts us enough from the bright shiny things
Mm,
to look for ourselves, right? Look for our identity in that. Does
mm,
that is there is that something around like of the gift of struggle, the gift of trauma?
mm.
Sometimes is that reflection. Do you feel like there's a gift in that for you?
Yeah, I mean, personally, yes. I mean, it's that classic idea that um, I wouldn't have it any other way, but I wouldn't
Yeah,
wish it upon anyone.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's that
Absolutely.
classic idea, right? And like
Yeah,
I can no longer separate myself from the illness experience. It's all I know, and it's the reason that I am who I am today, and it guides the choices I've made. Um, and to me, that is growth, and I have been able to grow. But I also entirely acknowledge that it is not that for a
yeah,
lot of people, and that growth looks different, right? I mean, what I've done is weird.
yeah,
Like I've grown in a way that's odd.
yeah, yeah.
But equally, I've supported younger people with
Mm,
cancer that like were accountants,
mm,
got cancer, had treatment, and went straight back to accountancy and didn't want anything to change. Like
mm,
blip, reintegrate, on you go with your world. And I think they're all ways
yeah,
of growing and overcoming illness. But
yeah,
for me, I've used it, right?
yeah,
And I think that's how you kind of open this thing. It was
yeah,
like, what are the pieces in you that allowed you to use this in this way?
yeah.
Yep.
Very true. Um, Interesting. Just in terms of context, right? If we go back to that time where you've got a diagnosis and you've got to find a way forward. Uh, um, One of the interesting things is how I see people talk about cancer, making decisions about how to communicate it, what what stigma is attached to having cancer, and so on. What was your experience like sharing the news, and did people struggle to talk with you, and did you need that or find a way to solve that dilemma?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag, as you well know. It's a mixed bag. I mean, different people have different skills.
Mm.
I was 28, so that's a slight difference to it. My partner was 22, even younger. Um, there's people that are going to kind of dissolve in front of you,
Yeah, yeah,
and those when I thought that might happen, I would outsource the communication. So I might say like, "Mum, can
yeah,
you call? I've got this adorable Auntie Kathy who's just the most emotional person you'll ever meet." I was like, "Can you just tell Auntie Kathy I don't think I can have that conversation?" Because I knew within seconds of hearing
yeah,
it, she would kind of crumble and need the support, right? There were other people that kind of treated it almost like I've told them I got a paper cut, right? Like,
yeah,
oh, I cut my finger today on an envelope.
Yeah.
And they were
Yeah.
just completely, okay, oh yeah, you got cancer. All right, what's next?
Mm.
And it's like, no, there's a middle ground where what I needed was some kind of, empathy,
Yeah.
sympathy, but not distress.
Yeah.
I didn't want to have to prop up other people. And then there was like, I remember a good mate, Tim, who I'd started the business with in China. I told him, and then he happened to be coming to Australia for his own visa reasons about a month after my diagnosis, and I hadn't made it back to Beijing. And he was coming back. I was in Melbourne, and he was coming
Mm.
back to Sydney, and he wasn't going to come and see me. And I thought, well, that's odd. Like we're kind of best buddies, and we're setting up this business together. And I've just got cancer, and and I mustered up the strength to email him, like not even call him about it because I was so scared. And I emailed him. I was like, dude, I think I need you to come and say hi,
Yeah.
and us to like just go for a walk together. And he was like, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know what to do,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
I didn't know how to come there
Yeah.
and be with you in
Yeah.
that space when you may
Yeah.
die. And I think, some people were really open-minded about asking me
Mm.
what they wanted. Um, but God, it's a mixed bag. And I get really skeptical of like guides and blueprints about how to
Yeah.
be,
Yeah.
because it's, as you know, John, it's so individual,
Yeah.
and it's going to depend on each relationship that you have. The key thing that I say to people who are supporting others with illness is read the room, just read the room and ask,
Mm.
ask. People avoid this stuff. You know this, that's why you've got a podcast. People avoid these topics,
Yeah.
and we all yearn to talk about it.
Absolutely.
That's going to vary how we do that, but
Yeah.
the yearning, I think, is almost
Yeah.
universal.
I,
And so create the window.
Absolutely. It's such good advice. Thank you for that. Because, one thing I notice, with supporting people going through big challenges is at that time, it's the most important thing in their life. And yet there's a whole sort of energy in the community to gloss over it like it's
Mm,
nothing, right? And I find that a very interesting dichotomy, like a
mm.
challenging one.
Yeah, and John, I think it's got a cultural. We might get off topic, but I think it's got a real cultural component to it. I think,
Yeah, yeah.
kind of, we share a culture, and I think our culture's not particularly good at it.
No,
I
no,
think you're like, but
no.
other cultures are so much better at this, and
Right,
some are
yeah,
worse,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
some are so much better. And I think that, it's really important that we just are aware that I think it's universal
yeah,
that you're right, John. It's the most important thing for that person. And whether it's if it was a wedding that was the most important thing, you'd
yeah,
talk about it.
yeah,
If it was the birth of a new child, it was the most important thing, you would talk
yeah,
about it. We should treat illness the same,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, you can't shut up grandparents when they've got a new grandchild,
No
right? So
way.
yeah,
But give them
yeah,
a cancer diagnosis and they go to ground.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, do you mind if I ask you about, you had a 5 month relationship? Can I ask you about that? So, how,
Yeah.
the stress on that from both sides must have been huge, right? How did you navigate that? Right? Was that the making? Because you now, of course, you've gone on and stayed together and married and children and so on. So,
Mm.
was that the making, or was that a challenge to overcome?
It's a good question. I think it's both.
Yeah,
I think the challenge was foundational. I was lucky because so I was 28, Sana was 22. She's Canadian Pakistani. So there was some cross-cultural stuff that we knew we'd have to navigate eventually in terms of
yeah, yeah,
religion and geography, but
yeah.
we didn't anticipate this acute
No,
challenge.
wow,
I got the diagnosis. I literally like I was totally in love with her, and she was me, and I was head over heels, which hadn't happened in that way before. Well aware though that she was 22,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
it's a big deal.
yeah,
And I literally had to say, this can be my thing, and you didn't sign up for
right,
this,
yeah,
and it will be okay if you don't want to be a part of this. Um, and she never hesitated. Um, but I still gave her that
Yeah.
later as well. Like, because
Yeah. Yeah.
I really wanted to make sure that this didn't become the thing
Yeah.
that glued us together because of this. I wanted it to glue us together because what we already had meant we could. And it was such a challenge. My God, I flew back for 5 days. I never made it back to Beijing. I have to call her after the colonoscopy from the car park and say, they found a mass. It's horrible. It's probably a tumor. I'm being rushed off for a CT scan. Um, the next day, she had to go and film a TV show.
Oh
An
gosh.
hour after our phone call, she then gave them notice. She got on a plane. She was in
Wow.
Melbourne within 24 hours. Then we have the problem of, okay, so where do we live and what do we do? And you need a visa,
Yeah.
and we have no savings. And it kind of forced us together. What it did for us was it aged the relationship really quickly.
Yeah.
And that's not always amazing
No.
because it meant that we actually did miss out on those. We had 5 months, but you normally get a bit
Mm,
longer
mm,
where it's joyful and
mm.
fun and flirty and ultra sexual and it's all
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah.
That stopped
Yeah. Yeah.
5 months in, and it took years
Yeah.
to get that back.
Yeah.
Years to get that back. And so the benefit is there's a trust and an intimacy that is unparalleled at our ages.
Yeah.
But we lost a trust and an intimacy for our ages.
Wow. So that's a wonderful assessment of the challenges, and of course, there's a lot of wisdom in that for because people judge partners for say leaving a situation like that,
Mm,
and
yep.
you can completely understand when you're standing back.
Yeah. I mean, we've had friends. So we made, Sana had a very good friend, a best friend actually in Beijing, who coincidentally got a melanoma diagnosis a year after my diagnosis. She moved back to New York. Radically different treatment journeys. She was paying for chemo on credit card. Like the American health system is a whole other podcast.
Yeah,
And I'm running through, gold
yeah,
standard treatment, waving a Medicare card.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But she was with a guy. They'd been together for about 6 months when she got diagnosed, and he left.
yeah,
And it's that's painful
yeah,
and it's hurtful, but I understand it.
yeah,
And it was very difficult.
mm,
And Sana naturally had a lot of anger
mm,
because she'd stuck with me, right? But
mm.
it's a different relationship, and it's really hard to judge on the outside.
Yeah, absolutely, and that goes back to that idea of conversation, right?
Mm,
Read the room, get in there,
mm,
and have a conversation about
mm.
things. I love that. Again, thank you for sharing that. We kind of get to the journey, and like your progress, like the good, the bad, the blood and tears, right? You did well. What now with some because we don't remember the pain, right? We don't remember the thing. We remember the context of it.
Mm.
When you look back on it now, what is your overall impression of that process? What do you like about it? Like yourself and what how you reacted and what you did, and what do you wish you knew more about now? Wish you the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, so I hadn't been ill before this. So not I was not only navigating illness, I was navigating a healthcare system.
Yeah,
Don't have doctors in family or anyone health trained, so it was all alien. I needed radiation therapy, a very large surgery, and then some chemotherapy for 5 months. Got blood clots in the lungs, needed anticoagulation after that. So it was like not complication free. I had a stoma for a year that I lived with and managed a bag,
yeah,
which
wow.
was eventually reversed. Um, uh, I've got lots of regrets about being ill. Um, and again, it comes back to Sana.
Mm,
I just think, it would be hard for me to do it differently because you just do what you do. But I was an asshole at times,
mm,
and I was very, and it sounds weird to say, I was very selfish, and part of it needs to be, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's my cancer and I've got to get over it,
yeah,
and I've got to do what's in my interest. But I took a lot from her,
yeah,
and I didn't always think about care for the carer.
yeah,
I didn't, and she's not naturally a person that finds it easy to ask for help.
yeah,
And I think maybe I could have done a better job at making sure that my principal carer was cared for very hard in the throes of discomfort and pain and frustration and existential agony.
mm,
But that was kind of the big thing that I kind of regret and think about. Um, I think I navigated the healthcare system okay. I have all the problems that everyone else does, and that's why I became a doctor exactly,
mm,
because the system is hard and it
mm,
does dehumanize,
mm,
it disempowers, it does all
mm,
these horrible things to people. Um, I don't think I did any better or worse than anyone else in that regard, but in terms of the initial response to illness, it would really be about my now wife
mm.
and some of the regrets I carry there.
I think that's a great way of looking at it. That moment of connection is such a powerful resource, right? So, is there like who else was connected to you? Like who else offered that resource?
Yeah, people were fantastic. My sister was based in Sydney at the time, was very helpful. Flew down, supported me, thought of interesting ways to help me heal. I remember she rocked up with a voucher for an energetic healer. And I had a science degree, and I
Yeah,
reminded her of that. But she was like, keep an open mind, see,
yeah,
things like that, which set me off on a really interesting exploration into
yeah, yeah,
alternative medicine, but also actually really informs my work as a doctor now, having been in that environment and seeing how they
yeah,
do things so differently. Um, Dad came down, so the eventual dad that I chose when I was 15, his name's Ian.
yeah,
He was heavily involved in my life by then. He came down and supported us, and he loves cooking and tidying up, so he was very helpful in that department. Mum in Melbourne was an extremely, Mum was mum. She was there with bags of
mm,
goodies,
mm,
toiletries. She would take time off to come and sit with me during chemo, and she was a big financial support. Right, what we don't talk about enough in major illness like this is the financial toxicity.
absolutely,
Is
yeah,
is an
yeah,
emerging thing.
yeah,
And despite having a world-class health system, there's lots that's out of pocket, and there's lots that you don't aren't scaffolded by.
absolutely,
And Mum was just knowing that Mum was there, that she had some savings, that she could safety net us, like
yeah,
that was just invaluable. And then there's all the experts, like the psychologists, the physiotherapists, the stoma therapists, who also happen to be, you know, trained in sexual function and sexual
mm,
counseling, who I was able to ask all those questions about, like, is my penis going to work again?
yeah, yeah,
And what
wow,
do I do with my testicles now that
yeah,
they've been zapped?
yeah,
Like all these things. So that, like, the health system gave me connection as well, which was really nice. And those relationships, so when you the chaos of a busy surgical ward in a leading cancer hospital, the stoma therapist that comes in and has that conversation with you is a conversation that stays with you forever. I remember there was a music therapist who would come and
yeah,
play music on the ward. Sana and I happened to have our 1 year anniversary while I was admitted post-op,
wow,
and she took a song request and pulled that curtain across from my 4 bedroom, and it just felt like we were on a date.
wow,
And she played to us, and we just held each other. I mean,
wow,
those things, those moments to connect with the healthcare providers and the people around you. That's medicine.
yeah,
Like that's
totally.
that's healing.
But of course, that view of medicine is informed by your experience, right? And a lot of the doctors in both have a different experience. They don't bring; they have an expertise rather than an
Mm,
experience,
mm.
right? Which brings us probably to what you learnt, and then the choice. I read in your book you Googled how to become a doctor. Obviously, something popped into your head.
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
Right?
Yeah, I did.
So,
I did.
like, what was the link, right? Where, was suddenly going like, did a specialist walk in and piss you off, and you said, "Oh, bugger it, I can do this better myself," right?
No, it's interesting. There was no one moment where it kind of coalesced. I had like because I kind of I'd studied animal behavior. That was one of my specialties within zoology. So I kind of like was observing how people interacted in this space, how they kind of moved through it as
Mm.
habitat. The thing that struck me over the treatment was that it's a very weird space. Hospitals are a weird space. They're odd. They're it's not immediately clear who they're designed for.
Yeah, yeah,
They didn't appear to be designed for patients, and they almost didn't appear to be designed for doctors and nurses either. So it left me wondering who on earth had made this thing. The systems were unusual. The
yeah,
routine and the pattern was odd. The theatre of it,
yeah,
stripped of your clothing and your personal belongings, barcode on the wrist,
yeah,
under a bed number, behind a
yeah,
piece of plastic that's ripped open at will by people who don't tell you who they are. And I had equally beautiful experiences and equally distressing experiences across a range of healthcare providers. What I realized was there was no one person or thing in the system that was a problem. It was the collective
mm,
sum
mm,
of the
yeah,
system.
yeah,
And being, an ecologist and thinking about systems and environments and habitat, I felt like there was something I could contribute here. I remember one point during chemotherapy, I was in a steroid induced insomniac rage. And it was like 3 a.m. and I'd been baking banana bread and I had to stop.
yeah,
And I sat down at the computer and I typed that point and it may be the steroids, John, but like I just typed into the Google at 3 a.m. like how do I become a doctor?
yeah,
No clear,
mm,
I'm gonna be a better surgeon or I'm gonna go and be a nurse or I'm gonna train as a physio. It was just like, oh, this is the thing I've been living in for 9 months. Like how do people enter this world?
yeah,
And then I parked it. I never looked at it again
yeah,
until a year and a half later. And I decided at that point that I tried to work
mm,
and go back to science communication, but it wasn't working. I needed to do something different. I took a year off. I let it all sink in. I opened my heart. I opened my mind. I realized that I did want to go into this world, and then I had to think about how.
mm,
So, do I go in as a nurse? Do I go in as a
mm,
psychologist? Do I go in as a doctor? The doctor thing made sense because I'd had the science background. I felt like I could probably
mm,
cope. But the key bit, John, was they seem to have a lot of the power,
yeah,
and it wasn't like an Elon Musk thing where I want power.
yeah,
It was like they call the shots, I think.
yeah,
And if I'm in that world and I learn their language
yeah,
and I learn how they learn how to interact with patients, I can tweak it
yeah,
as well as kind of be that person in the system to set about some changes.
yeah.
And so I googled it and then sat the test and got a spot here in Sydney and did a 4-year graduate program in medicine.
Amazing. Of course, I, on behalf of all of the people who have, ever been told to be a doctor by their sort of, yeah, parents at some stage, and have feared that test, right?
Yeah,
I point out that you're triggering us, and it's really
sorry,
annoying, right?
sorry,
Yeah,
John.
because you just throw it off and going, oh well, I just by Wednesday I was accepted as a doctor, right? Like,
Well, look, John, I wish it was that simple. So I applied for the test. First of all, it costs a fortune, right? So
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
need a degree of money.
yeah,
That's what first struck me. And then I spent 8 weeks and I was just studying for that test.
yeah.
And that's not realistic for lots of people. And then I happened to get a score that was okay. Because John, it's the test is not about medicine. This is the other
No,
thing that struck me as odd.
no, that's
I
right.
was
Yeah,
analyzing poetry.
yeah.
And I'm like, hang on a second. Why am I analyzing poetry
And of
to
course,
get into
like
med
I have
school?
never, I've seen non-stop so many specialists like hit me with the man from Snowy River just when I needed it, right? So it's like yeah, yeah,
They're drawing from that
uh,
exam.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I could see the benefit of it. Um, so excited that you did because, and of course, the book, The Patient Doctor. I love that. Um, um, Medicine needs more puns for sure, right?
Mm,
So, and it talked about how your experience really informed your attitude, but
mm.
not but at the same time you're taking what is kind of a radical attitude into a traditional process.
Which is something I did not appreciate. I
Yeah.
did not appreciate that. And some of that I think is like white guy confidence. So,
Yeah.
like, I'm a tall white guy. Society's
Yeah.
relatively easy, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a part of the mobility I have to acknowledge here. Like, working class roots, went to university, was able to travel, able to go into medicine. But even with my privilege, right, which
Mm.
we're more comfortable talking about now, I was very different
Mm.
from a lot of people sitting in that classroom on day one.
Yeah.
Um, they they came from like expensive postcodes.
Yeah. Yeah.
They went to private schools.
Yeah.
They had
Same.
private health insurance.
Yeah.
Either their mum or their dad or both were doctors,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And like it was
They certainly
expensive.
didn't have any facial hair or like yeah.
Well, it was a graduate program, so there was
Yeah.
a
Oh,
bit
right.
of roughage around, right?
Right.
They're a
Yeah.
little bit older. They've done something else, but
Right.
I guarantee you, there were very few people in that room that had been as ill
Yeah.
or around illness to the degree
Yeah.
that I was. I bet they were from families that didn't smoke, that weren't
Yeah.
overweight,
Yeah.
that didn't have to worry about the gap at a specialist.
Yeah.
It was really different. And so not only was my origin story different, but I had almost died and I was learning about illness, having been ill and still being a
Mm.
cancer patient, right? Still going to three
Mm.
monthly checkups. And
Mm.
I realized that the people that were selected for med school had nothing to do with the skills required to be a
Mm.
doctor.
Yeah.
Yes, academic smarts. Yes, the ability to memorize tests and textbooks for
Mm.
hours and hours and hours alone. Yes, that skill is more than overrepresented at med school. But all the other stuff
Yeah.
that matters to people that
Yeah.
are being healed is not selected for. And John, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. And I thought after my first week, um, it'll be okay because they're going to teach us that stuff.
Mm.
I didn't need to learn it, but I needed to shape
Mm.
it.
Mm.
I wasn't that arrogant, but a lot
Yeah.
of the people in that room needed it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
it didn't come, John. It
No.
didn't come.
No.
And instead of empathy and listening and communication and teamwork and leadership, it was anatomy and
Yeah.
physiology and pharmacology prizes. And
Yeah.
I just was flabbergasted that they set off this path where they select this really odd group of people that do not represent society
Yeah.
and then make them even less representative, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Make them even less representative and create distance,
Yeah.
enforce, put in concrete the distance between them and the people they would be healing.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it, John. And I went to the literature again because that's the
Yeah.
pattern, and I looked it up in PubMed, and paper after paper after paper from around the world had found this in every medical school ever examined. And I'm like, they've known this for 30 years, and they're still teaching medicine this way. And
Yeah.
as a patient, I saw firsthand where some of the things I'd seen in the system that doctors and nurses did in hospital, I saw where it started now. I saw the seeds of these behaviors. I saw the seeds of these attitudes.
Yeah.
And it was heartbreaking.
Yeah. I like it. I'm vibrating with resonance on that. Right. The sense of I thought that they had a special program that trained arrogance into specialists, right? So,
Mm.
and I get it, right? There's that sense of godlike power because for the
Hmm.
talent and intelligence,
Yep.
but the healing they don't heal. Like as a doctor, you don't heal. The person heals.
Yep. Yep. You definitely help. And you
Yeah, yeah,
definitely,
you're
yeah,
like you're
yeah,
providing that
yeah.
the tools and environment
And the relationship.
and the relationship.
Yep.
So I've always wondered about professional distance,
Mm.
right? The sense of like how is professional distance an aid to
Mm.
healing?
Yeah, you're right. Doctors have been really late to the game here. I mean, there's loads of reasons that
Yeah,
medicine is so hierarchical, patriarchal, um, you know, strict and conservative. Lots of reasons for that. And they lead to what you're describing. It's funny when I get up and do talks, people like will say, "Oh, but I can't connect because I will burn out."
yeah,
Or I won't, I will lose myself. And I just do a simple thought experiment. If imagine I was a nurse and you're saying to me, don't get too close,
yeah,
don't get too close to patients, don't connect too much, don't ask them what matters. No
yeah,
one would ever think of doing that because nurses are the carers, right? They're the
yeah,
ones,
yeah,
psychologists, social workers,
yeah,
peer workers, right, in the mental health space. These people connect and they know how to connect in a way that's
yeah,
therapeutic and protects themselves,
yeah,
but also gives them job satisfaction
yeah,
and
yeah,
purpose and efficacy. Doctors have hidden far too long behind this idea that they need to be on the other side of the desk in a white coat and it's us and them.
mm,
And I just think there's so much we could do to our own humanity in order to aid the humanity of the people we're healing. And I think that you're right about the arrogance thing. It's not that it's taught. It's definitely modeled,
mm,
but it's reinforced is
mm,
the problem. And
mm,
we are kind of, you know, we pride ourselves on the knowledge that we have,
mm,
and it's tested all the time under stupid hostile conditions. And the thing that I learned when I went to med school, right, is I wasn't angry at my colleagues. I felt sorry for them.
mm, mm.
And I felt sorry for the system. And what I realized was that you get to the end of your medical training, I'm in my 11th year, I'm still a junior doctor. You
Yeah,
get to your 11th year, and the sacrifice is enormous.
yeah,
And so people then get pumped out as specialists, having given up
yeah,
so much of themselves to the system that they almost feel owed.
yeah, yeah,
And if they had connected throughout that
yeah,
journey with the people they were healing and each other in deep, deep ways, but also had fought for a system that treated
yeah,
them like people,
yeah.
it wouldn't be like that.
No, no, wow. That's such an insight. I love that, connecting that back to something you said earlier about finding out more about other ways of healing, right? So when you were introduced to an energy healer, right, that concept.
Yeah.
So like, and you mentioned non-traditional, non-white
Mm,
ways of healing and so on.
yep.
You would have seen that with Chinese medicine, and
Hmm.
of course, so there are modalities out there that don't owe anything to that traditional model. So how do how do you bring that into your world, right? You being more understanding that there's more involved.
The thing that I learned, so I had an amazing hands-off energetic healer. It probably belongs to the family of healing they call kinesiology.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And look, and there were pictures of meridians
yeah,
and chakras
yeah,
up on the walls and bits of anatomy with labels. Um, the thing I realized, I didn't buy into
yeah,
that because I've seen the randomized
yeah,
control
yeah, yeah.
trials
You've
that
got
stuff doesn't outperform
scientific
placebo.
method. Yeah,
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 but those spaces are healing.
yeah.
Those
That's right.
relationships
Yeah,
are healing.
yeah,
And what I realized, I walked into the energetic healers clinic.
yeah,
There's a salt lamp.
yeah,
There's a couch. It's not a bit of plastic that's, doused in bleach every
yeah,
3 days. There's a couch to sit on.
yeah,
There's reading material. There's nice music playing.
yeah.
I don't have to wait an hour.
No, no,
She's on time.
yeah,
She came out. She would greet me. We would sit down at a table and talk,
yeah,
and she was as interested in where I grew up and what my goals were and what my fears were as she was understanding where the cancer was and which energy system she would use to manipulate it, right? And these are hands off therapies. She didn't touch me, so I don't have that placebo effect. But then I'm down on a bed and I'm vulnerable and I'm fully clothed, so it's not like the vulnerability you get on a CT machine or in an
yeah,
operating theater.
yeah.
I'm
Exactly.
as vulnerable,
Yeah,
and she's talking.
yeah,
She's talking to me as a person,
yeah, yeah,
and there's a power difference and there's a knowledge difference, and I'm paying her, so there's a commercial relationship. But that's all used
yeah. Wow.
to the benefit of the person that's recovering. And I just feel like in hospitals, again, back to this
Yeah,
design thing, we've forgotten that people come in and use them. And we've forgotten that people come in and
yeah,
work in them. And
yeah.
John, you go to some hospitals, there's no mobile phone reception.
No, no,
Like you don't know how many hours the doctor is going to
no.
be. You don't know if it's going to be your doctor or another doctor. There's some basic stuff to do with
Even
just
the beds are uncomfortable, right? They don't
they're
like
horrible.
Yeah,
And don't get me started on gowns.
no,
You've heard me talk about gowns. Don't get me started on the basic stuff that we just don't seem to have engineered. We've lost track of the
mm,
fact that, and again, John, I think it's a fear.
Mm.
of like, well, if we borrow from some of what the other healers
Yeah.
are doing, we're compromising our
Yeah.
professionalism, we're compromising our standards. No, you're building an environment built for purpose.
Yeah.
It's built for purpose.
Yeah. And I love that idea. Going back to my, this is about me. Sorry, but
No, go for it.
the idea of integrating, right? The environment of healing
Mm,
is, it helps the mind, the body,
mm,
and the energy, the soul, however you put it, helps it all come together so that the person is maximized. And
yep.
of course, the people who are bringing the resources, like doctors and nurses
Mm,
and stuff, need that to all come together, right? So they
mm.
need the patient to feel better as well as be better. You know.
Absolutely, and they're equally important.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're equally important because the feeling side of it is the thing, and you've alluded to this. It's the thing that lingers.
Yeah.
I don't. I remember some of the physical pain after my operation, but I don't remember the operation.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact
Mm.
detail of the chemo. I remember how I felt
Mm.
laying in the chemo chair
Yeah.
talking to other people with cancer. Right?
Yeah.
It's the feelings that linger, and they can be positive or they can be negative or destructive.
Yeah.
And that's when it gets into complaint territory and you start avoiding hospital systems. You feel alienated from those
Yeah.
spaces because they're harmful, right?
Yeah.
They can harm. And that's a lot of the time I felt like not only was the system not built to care, it was designed to harm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that just seemed extraordinary to me because, John, I've just come from a year working in a pediatric hospital.
Wow.
They get it.
Yeah.
Like there's art on the walls. They're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
all beige.
Yeah.
They have people that come around and talk about other stuff and play instruments and design board games and help you
Yeah.
color in. They understand that color and light and air and having gardens and spaces and playrooms matter. There's absolutely no reason we can't build adult hospitals like this.
Mm. Mm.
And it's not infantilizing the adult
No.
patient,
No.
but there's a degree of regression when you're
Mm.
sick, right?
Mm.
And
Absolutely.
I'm
Yeah.
in a bed
Yeah.
and my parents are standing over me. Like
Yeah.
it's the same thing. Like we can acknowledge that without exploiting it and we can use it.
Yeah. So the powerlessness of illness is very similar to the powerlessness of infancy.
Yep. And I don't think that's a dirty concept.
No.
I
No.
think
I
it's a
think
concept that we should actually fully embrace.
yeah. Absolutely. I love that. Um, of course, uniquely positioned to be, an expert on your experience, and you brought so much of yourself, your power of observation, and your scientific understanding to your experience, and of course, that's now translated in how you are both influencing healthcare and delivering it yourself, right? Which is amazing. So, first of all, I'd ask, I need to take the opportunity to ask, what do you think patients should do to maximize their outcomes?
Yeah, this is a hard question because it's almost it almost needs to be in I think the phase of healthcare reform that we're in. It's almost idealistic
Yeah,
because it's aspirational, and
yeah,
that's
yeah,
okay.
totally. Yeah,
Because at the moment, and because I straddle these two worlds, the system isn't really built
no.
to fully embrace what patients want. To be
Yeah,
honest,
yeah,
I don't think that would come to a surprise to anyone that's listening that's had health issues. I think look. There's some simple things. If we break it down quite pragmatically, there's I don't tell my patients not to Google.
yeah,
I think trying to pretend that medicine's in some kind of academic vacuum is
yeah,
ridiculous,
yeah,
particularly when like you can put your pathology results into Chat GPT and get some analysis, right?
yeah, yeah.
Like the age that we're the guardians of knowledge is
Mm,
gone.
mm.
And my hope, John, is that actually that allows us to restore the humanity.
Yeah,
My fear is we all just get swept up in an AI tsunami
yeah,
and
yeah,
we get further from the humanity, but that's a whole other podcast. So it's look around for information. You would never do something as complicated as sign up for a surgery if you substitute it in any other decision in your life without a second opinion.
yeah,
I
yeah,
tell
yeah,
everybody
yeah,
you should at least get two,
yeah,
if not three.
yeah,
What I realized having crossed over is that they're humans.
yeah,
learning things and then forming an opinion. The theatre of the desk and the waiting room and
Yeah.
the waiting time and the fee makes you feel like it's expert consensus,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it rarely is.
No.
It's opinion, and you should get another one always.
Yeah.
Um,
Brilliant.
that's not always practical, and I get that that's expensive. And that opinion actually might not be necessarily a doctor, but it might be something online. It might be a study. It might be a blog. It might be some lived experience, right? But you gotta use other sources of information. Um, it's hard, but always have someone with you. So take people to appointments, even if you think it's going to be a boring, routine
Yeah.
appointment.
Yeah.
You don't know what's coming.
Mm.
And if something comes and it destabilizes you, you're going to wish you had a second pair of eyes
Yeah.
and ears there.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the minimum, you're going to wish that you had someone afterwards to go and have a cup of coffee with
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
process what happened,
Yeah.
right? I keep a journal. So when
Yeah.
I'm going through an acute illness phase, like I write down my appointments, I write down questions I might have because I, just like anyone else, John, despite my years of medical training, after a colonoscopy, I've had anesthetic. I'm nervous about the outcome. I've got a fear of the surgeon because they have so much power. I get nervous and I forget things.
Yeah.
So I write them down,
Yeah.
and I let my carer know the questions I'm interested in so that if I forget, they can ask. I think there's like, but what we don't do is we don't actually build these things into the medical model.
Yeah.
You've got to do them, and it can feel like you're being an inconvenience.
Yeah.
Like, really, like if you tell your doctor you're going to get a second opinion, you can often feel like you've committed a
Yeah.
crime,
Yeah.
right? And it shouldn't be like that. These things should be standard. We should be actually, every doctor should be telling every patient, you need someone here. I expect questions written down. I want you to get a second opinion.
Yeah. Brilliant. Do you think patients need to take control, like ownership of their outcomes? So,
I think that's tricky.
mm,
I'd be interested in your view on it. I think again, it's going to depend on the person. It's going to depend on their preferences, and it's going to depend on the illness.
mm,
Some things you have to relinquish. Some things you have to relinquish.
yeah. Yeah.
Like I didn't expect to be driving the bus
Mm,
for my care,
yeah.
but I expected to have a seat in there,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's
To
what
be
I
at least
wanted.
consulted. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and not left behind at the
Yeah.
petrol station.
Yeah.
Like that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
Some people want to drive,
Yeah.
and I think that's okay. And I think the system has to be built up for multiple ways to navigate that. Um, this comes down to actually the system asking people what they want,
Yeah.
which they don't do. We
No.
don't say
No.
to people,
No.
or
Yeah.
like a basic psychological screener
Yeah.
when you enter a new illness experience or a recovery journey, just like what are your preferences, what are
Yeah.
your traits, what are your expectations, and John, that's the first step, and then you match that
Yeah.
with the illness, the provider, the clinic, the outpatient clinic where you are. And I think that's the fit, right? This is a really individual approach. And you'll hear lots about patient centered care, and you'll see billboard after advertisement in the hospital walkways about
Yeah.
patient centered care. But really, it's just marketing speak at
Yeah.
this stage. To actually be patient centered, you'd be doing the things you and I are talking about.
Yeah. And I also wonder sometimes about the role of patients educating medical providers, nurses, and doctors. Right, I think there's a place for some of that. So,
John, you are spot on the money. So my other thing when I went to med school was that one, I saw the people selected were not representative, and then that difference was reinforced. The second big thing, where were the bloody patients?
yeah, yeah,
Like they weren't there
no,
at med school and I wanted like patient professors, right? Like I wanted them there
yeah,
in the school where we're learning about medicine. I wanted them called professors. I wanted them respected as educators, and I wanted their material assessed, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
wanted Jane's experience of breast cancer
yeah,
and some of the things she felt examined
yeah,
because what I sadly learned at med school is unless you test it, they won't learn it.
yeah,
And then then they tried to tell me that well, once you're a student and you're out in the wards, you'll be on ward rounds, and they're patient empowered environments, and they're friendly, and they're not.
no,
I mean, getting grilled about my understanding of the immune system over someone's bed who's got cancer is not nice for me or them. And
yeah,
so,
yeah,
and also get then on the ward round, knowing that there's 20 more people to see and everybody's late,
yeah,
getting Jane to tell the students, so Jane, tell them what it's like to have breast cancer is not patient-centered education. I wanted them everywhere. And I think we have a fear of embracing that experience.
Yeah.
It's psychiatry does a pretty good job of lived experience and peer worker engagement, right? And co-design. All the other specialties are miles behind in terms of opening themselves to lived experience as a form of teaching.
Yeah. Absolutely. Brilliant idea. There are probably two questions. I acknowledge your time today. It's been amazing. Two questions. One, two big questions. Probably deserve a podcast on its own. The first one is about you. How do you see yourself moving forward? Is this a mission, a dual mission that you have to be someone who cares for the community in two ways? First of all, provide the care directly, and also change how care is provided. Is that your future?
Yeah, I think so. That's nicely summarized. I might hit you up to write that down for me next time because that's I've never actually described it so succinctly. I think that is exactly it, right? It's like being in the system, providing care while changing it.
Yeah,
And look, there are lots of doctors that come into the system and then leave and then write about these
yeah,
things.
yeah,
But I've got to be in it. My
yeah,
heart's in public healthcare. It's in a public hospital. It's inside a hospital, right?
yeah,
Which was where lots of care has to
yeah,
occur,
yeah,
and it's also where lots of harm can occur.
yeah,
And so that's my setting. I'm in the pointy end. I'm delivering care, and I don't like be honest with you, John. Like I don't get to deliver the kind of care I want to all the time because I'm in a system
mm,
that doesn't always reward those behaviors. When I do my performance reviews, no one's asking the patients I've cared for
yeah,
how I
yeah,
went.
yeah.
They're asking me how
360
I think I
degree
went.
feedback has a bit of a
Oh,
hole, which is what the patients
oh.
think about you.
It has not only that, John. They don't even ask my colleagues what they think
Yeah,
of
yeah,
working
yeah.
with me. It's so weird here. It's archaic, right? It's like the 1950s. So you've got to change it while providing care. 100% my agenda.
Wow, that's beautiful. And then, of course, the challenge is, what do you feel is possible for the future of the system? Can it respond to the voices like yourself and others, and the patient movement? Can it actually change? Can it be something better?
Yep, 100%. I'm so optimistic. And John, there's examples from around the state. We're recording this in
Mm.
New South Wales, from around the state, from around the country, and from around the world. The thing is, like, thanks for not asking me the trap question, which is, what's the one thing you change? Because there is no one
No,
thing,
no,
right?
no.
There's no,
It's,
and you know
it's,
that. You
it's
know
got to
that.
be a few more things than
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah. But you'd be surprised how many people ask me that. Go on, Ben, what's the one thing? It's like there's no one thing. And also, the one thing at a hospital in Wagga Wagga is not
Yeah,
going to be the one
totally
thing at a
different. Yeah,
hospital in Melbourne, right? And what we're increasingly realizing is that there's small things that can happen at scale from people who have the answers, and they are the people providing care and the people receiving care.
right.
And when they're together
Yeah,
at a table with a mutual understanding and respect, thinking about a problem from each of their perspectives, that's the money. And those initiatives you see springing up around the place are amazing. There's a,
yeah,
a great program in Western Sydney where they asked people who have to spend time in emergency departments, and this is in the news all the time, how long you have to spend in an emergency department.
yeah,
They asked people who wait around in emergency departments, what could we do here in the waiting room
yeah,
to make things better? And
yeah,
it was simple stuff, John, like a mobile phone charging station,
yeah. Wow.
some update
Yeah,
from the person behind
yeah,
the glass wall who seems scared of us,
yeah, yeah.
some
Yeah,
update from them
who
every now and
refuses to look you in the eyes?
look at
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
some
yeah,
update from them every now and then about how long it might be. We know it might be 2 more hours, but just tell us.
yeah,
Patient liaisons at the door,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
so over that way is triage. Then you're going to have to take a seat here. The doctors will come
yeah,
out of this door. Um, Modules in different languages, very important.
yeah. Wow.
These are the things happening around you. Here's how the system works in your language. iPads to look at if your phone dies.
Right.
Something to do in the waiting room. An ability to fill up your water bottle. Like,
Yeah. Wow.
John, this stuff is not. This is not going to
That's
come from AI.
yeah,
This
yeah,
is going to come from remembering that there's people in a room who are trying to feel better and don't want to be harmed while they do that. And it's so simple, John. And that's why I'm hopeful, because there's some low hanging fruit in healthcare
yeah,
and it's cheap. It just needs will.
Yeah.
And slowly the people coming through the doctor pipeline are no longer prepared to put up with how the system was. And certainly the people coming in through the front door ill are no longer prepared to put up with how it was. And that tension, right, will be where the change comes from.
Oh, wow. That is an outstanding answer for a very, very challenging problem, but I really look forward to it. Ben, it's been incredibly inspiring to talk to you. By the way, congratulations on the book, The Patient Doctor, because not only is it such an important subject, I really enjoyed your writing, mate. So you're like,
oh, thank you. That's
so
really
you
nice.
must have
Thank
done
you.
well on the poetry and English section of the book.
It was my best mark, John.
Yeah. Because the writing's beautiful.
Thank you.
It's and it really connected to somebody who's who's been in the system a bit. So congratulations. Thank you so much for joining us on Kintsugi Heroes, Stories That Matter. It really does. Your story really does matter, and I am so excited to see you go on and make all that difference in the system. Awesome stuff, mate. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I've absolutely loved talking to you, buddy.
You're a champion. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Kintsugi Heroes. Thank you to Colin Lilly for permission to use Broken as our theme music for this series. If you enjoyed this conversation, share the podcast with a friend and let us know by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support Kintsugi Heroes and the stories we share, head to kintsugiheroes.com.au and follow the instructions to make a tax-deductible donation. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.